By the end of World War II, Germany had created a weapon that quietly changed the future of infantry combat. The STG-44 introduced the assault rifle concept decades before it became standard worldwide. Yet the United States, despite capturing and studying this weapon, chose not to copy it or adopt its core ideas at the time. This was not a technical failure, nor a lack of intelligence. It was a decision shaped by doctrine, victory, and confidence. To understand why the U.S. failed to copy the German STG-44, we must look beyond the weapon itself and examine the beliefs that defined American military thinking at the end of the war. In many ways, the STG-44 represented a new era of warfare that the United States was not yet ready to accept. While German engineers were forced to innovate under the pressure of shrinking resources and intense combat, the American military had the luxury of abundance. The U.S. had won the war using weapons that were already proven, and that success made it difficult to recognize the need for radical change. The STG-44 was therefore not seen as a model to be copied, but rather as a unique German solution to a German problem, an innovation that would only be fully understood years later. In 1944, as Allied forces pushed deeper into occupied Europe, American troops encountered a German infantry weapon unlike anything they had seen before. The Sturmgewehr 44 did not fit neatly into existing categories. It was not a bolt-action rifle, nor was it a pistol-caliber submachine gun. It represented a new idea altogether, a select-fire weapon firing an intermediate cartridge designed specifically for real battlefield engagement distances. The STG-44 allowed German infantrymen to deliver accurate semi-automatic fire while retaining the ability to unleash controlled automatic bursts when needed. From a purely technical standpoint, the weapon solved a problem that had plagued infantry forces since World War I. Full-power rifle cartridges were powerful, but produced excessive recoil, making automatic fire impractical. Submachine guns offered automatic fire, but lacked range and penetration. The STG-44 occupied the middle ground, using the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurz cartridge to balance power, controllability, and weight. This made it highly effective within the 100 to 300 meter range, where most infantry combat actually occurred. Yet despite capturing examples of the STG-44 and conducting technical evaluations, the United States did not copy the weapon, adopt its cartridge, or seriously pursue an equivalent assault rifle during or immediately after World War II. This decision was not accidental, nor was it based on ignorance. It was the product of deeply rooted American military assumptions, institutional inertia, and a belief that existing U.S. weapons had already proven superior in combat. One of the most important reasons the United States failed to copy the STG-44 was victory itself. By 1945, the U.S. Army had won a global war using weapons it already possessed. The M1 Garand had performed exceptionally well, giving American infantry a rate of fire unmatched by most Axis forces. U.S. machine guns, artillery, air support, and logistics overwhelmingly dominated the battlefield. From the American perspective, the war did not expose a crisis in infantry firepower that demanded radical change. American infantry doctrine before and during World War II was heavily influenced by marksmanship culture and long-range engagement theory. U.S. soldiers were trained to fire accurately at distances well beyond 300 meters. This doctrine assumed that fire discipline and accuracy were more decisive than volume of fire. The STG-44, with its reduced effective range compared to full-power rifles, appeared to contradict this philosophy. To many American officers, the idea of deliberately adopting a less powerful cartridge seemed like a step backward. This doctrinal mindset shaped how American analysts interpreted the STG-44. Instead of viewing it as a revolutionary solution to modern combat realities, many saw it as a desperate wartime expedient developed by a nation under pressure. German reliance on stamped steel construction and simplified manufacturing was interpreted not as innovation, but as a response to Allied bombing and material shortages. In contrast, the United States had no such constraints and therefore saw little reason to compromise weapon quality or power. One of the most decisive reasons the United States failed to copy the STG-44 was the sheer scale and structure of its industrial and logistical system at the end of World War II. Unlike Germany, which was forced to redesign weapons under constant bombing and material shortages, the United States possessed a secure, massively productive industrial base. American factories were already optimized to produce millions of rifles, machine guns, and billions of rounds of ammunition using established designs. From a strategic perspective, there was no incentive to disrupt a system that was functioning efficiently and had contributed directly to victory. Adopting the STG-44 would have required far more than reverse engineering a captured rifle. The weapon was inseparable from its cartridge, and the introduction of an intermediate round similar to the 7.92 by 33 mm Kurtz would have fundamentally altered U.S. supply chains. American logistics during World War II were built around standardization, particularly the 30-06 Springfield cartridge, which was used across rifles and machine guns. Changing calibers would have meant retooling ammunition plants, retraining armorers and troops, revising manuals, and maintaining parallel supply systems, an expensive and complex undertaking with no immediate operational benefit. Timing also played a crucial role. The STG-44 entered Allied awareness at the very end of the war, precisely when the United States was transitioning from total mobilization to rapid demobilization. Political and military leadership focused on reducing costs, downsizing forces, and converting wartime industry back to civilian production. In this environment, proposing a new infantry weapon system that required fresh investment, testing, and doctrinal change was not politically or economically attractive. Furthermore, American planners viewed German manufacturing techniques through a biased lens. The STG-44's extensive use of stamped steel was often interpreted as a shortcut forced by Germany's deteriorating industrial situation. While stamping was in fact an efficient and forward-looking method, U.S. industry did not need such efficiencies at the time. Precision machining was not a burden for American factories, so the perceived manufacturing advantages of the STG-44 did not outweigh the perceived risks of change. Ultimately, American industrial strength became a barrier to innovation. The United States could afford to continue producing heavy, full-power rifles and ammunition at scale, and that capability reduced the urgency to adopt new concepts. The STG-44 addressed problems of efficiency, weight, and controllability that Germany could no longer ignore. The U.S., protected by logistics and abundance, did not feel the same pressure and, as a result, chose stability over transformation. In the years immediately following World War II, the United States conducted extensive evaluations of captured German weapons, including the STG-44. While American analysts recognized that the rifle represented a novel approach to infantry firepower, they largely interpreted it as a product of German wartime desperation, rather than a deliberate response to combat realities. The STG-44's stamped construction and intermediate cartridge were viewed as compromises forced by material shortages and industrial collapse, not as indicators of a superior tactical concept. This interpretation was reinforced by long-standing American infantry doctrine, which prioritized long-range accuracy and individual marksmanship. U.S. planners continued to believe that infantry rifles should be capable of engaging targets at extended distances, even though wartime studies showed most firefights occurred at much shorter ranges. Instead of adapting weapons to these realities, American decision-makers favored theoretical performance and ballistic power, making the intermediate cartridge concept philosophically unappealing. Rather than adopting a reduced power round, the United States pursued the idea of a single, powerful cartridge that could replace both rifles and light machine guns. This approach led to the development of the 7.62 by 51 mm NATO cartridge in the early 1950s, which closely matched the ballistic characteristics of the 30-06 Springfield. The goal was continuity, not transformation, preserving existing doctrine while modernizing equipment. The rifle built around this cartridge, the M14, revealed the flaws in this thinking. Although accurate and powerful, the weapon was difficult to control in automatic fire, effectively negating its select fire capability. In practice, it functioned as a semi-automatic rifle, repeating the same limitations that German engineers had already addressed with the STG-44 more than a decade earlier. It was only through later combat experience, particularly in Vietnam, that the United States was forced to reconsider its assumptions. Short engagement distances, dense terrain, and the need for controllable automatic fire exposed the weaknesses of full-power rifles. By the time the U.S. adopted an intermediate cartridge and assault rifle, the core lessons of the STG-44 had already been demonstrated, understood, and implemented elsewhere. The delayed recognition of the STG-44's significance was rooted primarily in how the United States interpreted wartime success. American military institutions emerged from World War II with immense confidence, having defeated two major powers through overwhelming industrial output, superior logistics, and effective combined arms doctrine. In this context, there was little institutional pressure to question existing infantry concepts. Weapons that had contributed to victory were assumed to be fundamentally sound, and alternative approaches were viewed as unnecessary or situational rather than transformational. Another key reason the STG-44 was understood too late lies in how military innovation is often driven by necessity rather than foresight. Germany developed the assault rifle under extreme pressure, facing manpower shortages, resource constraints, and intense close-range combat, particularly on the Eastern Front. These conditions forced rapid adaptation. The United States, by contrast, did not experience comparable pressure on its infantry weapon systems. Without urgent operational failure, there was no catalyst compelling American planners to rethink the role of the individual rifleman. Additionally, the STG-44's late introduction limited its perceived impact. By the time Allied forces encountered it in meaningful numbers in late 1944 and early 1945, Germany was already in retreat. The weapon was never fielded in sufficient quantity to decisively alter battlefield outcomes. As a result, American analysts tended to associate it with Germany's defeat, rather than viewing it as a forward-looking solution. This timing caused the STG-44 to be historically overshadowed by the broader narrative of German collapse. The global spread of assault rifles in the post-war period gradually revealed what American planners had missed. The Soviet Union, which had also studied German intermediate cartridge concepts, fully embraced the assault rifle philosophy with the adoption of the AK-47 in 1949. Its widespread use demonstrated that controllable automatic fire, lighter ammunition, and shorter engagement ranges were not theoretical advantages but practical realities. Despite this, U.S. officials initially dismissed these developments as products of different tactical cultures rather than indicators of a universal shift in warfare. Ultimately, the STG-44 was understood too late because its lessons conflicted with deeply ingrained assumptions about firepower, range, and marksmanship. The United States did not lack the technical capability to adopt an assault rifle earlier. It lacked the doctrinal flexibility to accept that the nature of infantry combat had changed. When that acceptance finally came, it was driven not by analysis alone, but by costly experience in later wars, confirming that the STG-44 had identified the future of infantry warfare long before it became obvious to its victors. The STG-44 proved that infantry combat had changed, but the United States did not recognize that change until years later. American victory in World War II reinforced existing doctrines rather than challenging them, delaying acceptance of the assault rifle concept. While the U.S. eventually adopted similar principles, it did so only after costly lessons in later conflicts. In the end, the STG-44 stands not just as a German innovation, but as a reminder that winning a war does not always mean understanding its most important lessons. And this is just one satisfying chapter they left out of the textbooks. Military history is full of uncomfortable truths like this, moments where the winners missed what the losers understood, where innovation came disguised as desperation, and where the future arrived before anyone was ready to see it. If you want to uncover these stories with us, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next one.